work their farm, or folks just trying to make ends meet for their families. Part of the problem is every dollar you earn is taxed over and over again. Just think about all the taxes you pay every day. You pay property tax on your house. You pay taxes on the land you own and work. Your car and the gas to fill it up to get to your job or to use on your farm are taxed. Taxes on your employer means a smaller paycheck for you. That paycheck is taxed by Washington and then taxed again buying groceries and other basics for your family. Once you stop working, your retirement is taxed. Even after death, Uncle Sam still wants his cut, and he wants your grieving family members to pay it. Republicans look at working families and want to make it easier to help them get ahead. And we know that a smaller government, less regulations, and less taxation is the way to do that. Under President Trump, we passed a tax cut that benefited the working class. After that tax cut, people making less than $100,000 got on average a 16% cut in their tax bill to the government, while the top 1% actually saw their share of taxes go up. Workers in the bottom 10% saw 50% faster wage growth than people in the highest 10%. When working families prosper, America prospers. 5 million jobs were created after enactment of the Trump tax cuts. Investment rose over 20%. We ended the decades-long trend of American businesses moving their headquarters and jobs overseas. The lesson we should take from the Trump tax cuts is that when we put working families first, help small businesses succeed, and give Americans the tools to outcompete China, America will win. Democrats in Washington, including Vice President Harris, they don't see it that way. They look at working families and they see an ATM to fund their big government spending. That's why President Biden and Vice President Harris have both separately promised to let these beneficial tax cuts expire in order to raise taxes on all Americans, every single American. Vice President Harris has actually gone so far to call it a day one priority to repeal the Trump tax cuts in their entirety. Letting the Trump tax cuts expire would mean the average family of four earning $75,000 or less a year would face a $1,500 tax increase. That means smaller paychecks for families already struggling to make ends meet because of inflation that's gone up more than 20.3% in the last 3.5 years. The child tax credit would be slashed in half. The guaranteed deduction would be cut in half. The death tax exemption would also be slashed in half, especially hurting farmers in states like Iowa and Missouri. Small and family-run businesses, like so many farms are, would see their tax burden climb to 43.4%, making it harder to compete against larger corporations paying a 21% tax rate. So other than tax increases, what exactly are the tax priorities of the other side? As I said, none of my Democrat colleagues are here to answer that question. But if they were, my guess is they would be celebrating that today, that this very day actually marks the 2-year anniversary of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act becoming law. Democrats stuffed that bill with $650 billion in special interest tax breaks for the wealthy, their donors, big banks, billion-dollar companies, and China. Despite its name, the Inflation Reduction Act has done nothing to lower prices from where they were 2 years ago. It would be better named the Inflation Expansion Act. None of this would have happened without Vice President Harris's tie-breaking vote in the Senate. As the tie-breaking vote, she helped usher through a $10 trillion increase in government spending in just their first 2 years in office. This is the Democrats' plan for America: higher prices and higher taxes for the little guy and welfare for the wealthy and well-connected. That's why Republicans on this committee have formed tax teams and are traveling all over the country to build on the successful Trump tax cuts and stop the $7 trillion Biden-Harris tax hike. We've held over 60 meetings so far, with many more on the way. And just yesterday, the Rural America Tax Team, led by Chairman Smith, traveled through Nebraska and western Iowa to hear how the tax code can help farmers and small towns. I want to thank the witnesses for all being here today and sharing how the Trump tax cuts made a difference for you and your community. We also want to hear from everyone in attendance. There will be clipboards that our teams will pass out throughout the process. We ask that you submit for the record. We will enter those into the official House record of the hearing and take those back with us to Washington as we consider how to build on the successes of the prior tax cuts. I'm pleased to recognize our generous host, our good friend, Congressman Feenstra, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. I want to thank my colleagues for coming. We have taken Congress out of D.C. and brought it to the breadbasket of the world, to the Midwest, to Iowa. And I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank our witnesses for coming today. I want to thank Karen, Sarah, Jolene, Steve, and Lana for taking the time to answer the questions that we might have. This is so important for us as a state, for the Midwest. You think about what we have, from cattle to hogs to dairy to eggs to turkeys to biofuels to corn and soybeans. This is so important. This is our way of life that we're going to talk about today. But our way of life is affected when the tax cuts that happened in 2017 go away. I think of our families, where we doubled the standard deduction in 2017. We doubled the child tax credit for our families. I think of the small businesses and agricultural community that does the 199A pass-through credit, got a 20% discount. They got interest expensing reduced, got 179 depreciation increased. And it goes on, but all these things go away. And it'll have a dramatic effect for our families, for our small businesses, for our main streets. And when they're affected, our schools are affected, our hospitals are affected, and so many other things. That's why it's so important that we have this discussion today. And finally, I just want to say I ushered through in 2018, when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, I ushered it through the Iowa Senate, where we did the largest tax cut at that time in Iowa history. Well, I'll say this, I did it in the Iowa Senate, being Chair of Ways and Means, and I will come through again for each Iowan to make sure that these tax cuts continue to be cut as we move forward. Thank you so much, Chairman. Thanks for everyone for being here.
Thank you. I'm pleased to recognize the gentlewoman from Iowa, Ms. Hinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming back to the State Fair. Repeat customer, this is his second year in a row. Mr. Chairman's been here. Thank you to our witnesses and to everyone in the audience for coming out to talk about these important issues that affect our businesses here, our farmers, our producers, and working families. We're going to highlight a lot of those really important issues today. Mr. Chairman, I was struck by what you said about the agenda coming out of the Harris administration, Harris-Biden administration, and they will raise your taxes. I serve on the House Appropriations Committee. So thank you for letting me sit in as a guest today. But our committee is responsible for, hopefully, judiciously spending your tax dollars. I think there's a philosophical difference happening right now in Washington, D.C. We believe that that is your money, not the government's money. But our ranking member on that committee said just a few months ago in our markups this year, we do not have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem. That to me is code for they want to raise your taxes and they are addicted to spending your money. So Democrats, including Vice President Harris's, have promised to roll back these important tax cuts that Randy was just talking about, calling for a repeal of stepped-up basis and expiration of the 199A small business deduction. These are policies that so many multi-generational small family farms and businesses rely on every single day. And these are a critical tool to support all of our economies, but especially our rural economy here in Iowa. So we need to be competitive. We need to be competitive with our adversaries like the Chinese Communist Party. And I look forward to having the discussion today with our witnesses and all of you and my fellow colleagues from all over the country about how we can make sure we're returning that money, your money, back to you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. I'm pleased to recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Nunn.
Well, Chairman Smith, thank you so much for being here in the heart of the heartland. You know, I think we need more of these hearings outside of the Beltway and right in the Corn Belt, because this is where you're going to hear not from, politicians and lobbyists, but from real practitioners and real leaders. I'm thrilled with the lineup that we have today, and I'm grateful for members across the country on your Ways and Means Committee taking time to come out here and learn how it impacts your district, but then learn how it impacts really the middle of America and the jobs and the families and the lives that are impacted directly by this. I am proud that on day one, as a freshman on this panel, I went against the establishment to make sure that we fought for key taxes that impact our state. Working with this team here, we held together to make sure that biofuels were part of America's energy solution and our national security solution. With that, we were able to achieve it, and with your help, Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing us out on this. I'm also very proud, as a dad of 6 with 2 foster kids here that are now adopted, that we've made a priority of the child tax credit. It helps every family, it grows the economy, and it's important for our future here as families. And I'm also privileged to help lead the HEART Act, to help families who are decimated by natural disasters like those that happen right here in Greenfield, Iowa, where nearly a third of the town destroyed by severe storms and tornadoes. The 2017 tax credit has been a critical lifeline for all Americans, but particularly those right here in Iowa, with the average Iowa family of 4 seeing a 22% tax cut because of your good work. If these are allowed to expire through inaction or false promises, Iowans will see a 22% increase in their overall taxes at a time when no Iowa family can afford it. Because of the leadership that's happened both on this committee and I would say with your Iowa delegation, we have been part of the team that has cut Iowa taxes 3 times, the largest tax cuts in Iowa history. We have a proven example of how this works to grow the economy, to help all families, and as my colleagues highlighted here, to make sure that we pay off our debt while being successful for the future. Because of these tax cuts, Iowans have more money in their pockets, and they invest them right in the communities that matter, spending on their families and their communities and to grow our local economy. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for doing this, and thank you for the opportunity to join you.
Thank you, sir. I will now introduce our witnesses for today. First one is Karen DeWalt, is the Vice President for Global Tax at Home Depot. We have Sarah Curry, is a mother of 3 from Glenwood, Iowa, and serves as the Research Director at the Iowans for Tax Relief Foundation. We have Jolene Reason, is a farmer from Ida Grove, Iowa, and serves as the President of Iowa Corn. We have Steve Sukup, is the President and CEO of Sukup Manufacturing Company, a family-owned grain storage and drying manufacturer based in Sheffield, Iowa. And we have Lana Pohl, is the owner and president of Greetings, a small trucking company based in Pella, Iowa. Thank you all for joining us today. Your written statements will be made part of the hearing record, and you each have 5 minutes to deliver remarks. We'll start with you, Ms. DeWalt. You may begin.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, members of the Ways and Means Committee, and members of the Iowa delegation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Home Depot on why it is important to keep a competitive corporate tax rate. As the largest home improvement retailer, the Home Depot is uniquely in tune with how a competitive corporate tax rate is essential to staying in business in the United States. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA, which reduced the corporate tax rate to 21%, has been necessary in enabling American companies like ours to create jobs, invest domestically, and offer low prices on products for Iowans and all consumers. I am here today to share just how much the Home Depot invests in our great country. In the U.S., we operate over 2,000 stores and employ over 400,000 associates. Every Home Depot job supports more than 4 additional jobs across the U.S., which is more than twice the retail average. In Iowa alone, we support more than 7,000 jobs. In 2023, Home Depot paid $5 billion in corporate income taxes, which is approximately 1% of all federal income taxes collected in the United States. No one can say that we don't pay our fair share in taxes. Since the enactment of TCJA, we have undertaken several initiatives that demonstrate the positive impact of a lower tax rate. First, expansion and employment. We've invested $1.2 billion in our supply chain since 2017, establishing over 100 warehouse facilities. This has created more than 18,000 jobs in the U.S., improved our operational efficiency, and expanded our ability to deliver large, bulky merchandise like lumber, insulation, and roofing to better serve our pro customers. Second, investment in our workforce. The Home Depot invested approximately $1 billion in frontline associate wages in 2021 and an additional $1 billion annualized wage investment last year, ensuring that our employees are compensated fairly and competitively. This benefits our associates and contributes to local economies through increased spending power. Additionally, our store managers see the benefit of our wage investments in the lives of our associates. Our West Des Moines store manager told the story of one of his associates, a local Iowan whose life has changed from the Home Depot's investment in wage. She's gone from working 2 jobs to make ends meet to joining the Home Depot, growing her career, now as a department supervisor, and just moved into a new apartment with her son. Finally, we have invested significantly in technology to create an interconnected retail experience and help our associates provide better customer service. Now we are embarking on our next growth chapter, planning to open 80 new stores over the next 5 years, more than a dozen of which have already opened. These examples show that when we were given a lower rate through TCJA, we aggressively invested it back into our business and people. Any increase in the corporate rate will decrease the capital that we have to invest in our associates, stores, infrastructure, and capabilities, and will threaten to make us less competitive. Our investments in local communities through job creation, small business support, and giving back help stimulate local economies and improve quality of life. For example, we have over 80 small businesses in Iowa and Missouri that deliver supplies to our stores. These suppliers sold more than $140 million worth of product to the Home Depot in 2023. In addition, Home Depot is committed to supporting communities with natural disaster preparedness, short-term response, and long-term recovery, which makes a real difference when the need arises. In 2023, the Home Depot Foundation committed more than $8 million for disaster preparedness, response, and long-term recoveries in impacted communities from natural disasters. And this May, the foundation committed up to $300,000 to harder to reach communities, including those in Iowa impacted by tornadoes and severe flooding. This is an invaluable impact of our footprint, with associates in every state in the U.S. ready and able to serve our communities. In conclusion, maintaining a competitive corporate tax rate of 21% is essential for the continued growth and success of U.S.-based companies like the Home Depot. The Home Depot, it enables us to invest in our business, create jobs, and provide value to American consumers while supporting the broader economy. Our stores don't just sell products. They empower homeowners to renovate and maintain their homes at a reasonable cost, and they enable small to mid-sized contractors to grow their businesses. We urge policymakers to consider the positive impact of the current tax rate on businesses, communities, and the nation's economic health. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Curry, you are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Smith and members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity to comment here today on how the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has impacted me and my family. My name is Sarah Curry. I'm a wife and a mother to my 3 boys, Philip, who is 6, Isaac, who is 4, and Benjamin, who is 2. My family lives in rural southwest Iowa on approximately 10 acres. You have to drive down about 3 miles of a gravel road to get to my home. My husband works as a radiation oncology nurse at the nearby hospital, and I'm a research director for a nonprofit here in Des Moines. With 3 boys and 2 working parents, our family benefited immediately from many of the policies included in the TCJA. At the top of the list is the expansion of the child tax credit. For my sons, keeping more of our earnings helped us with the needs that all parents have for babies and toddlers. However, the tax credit has been especially significant for my family when Isaac arrived, because he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. The cost of Isaac's medical appointments and therapists is a large financial burden on my family, so we redirect every dollar that otherwise would go to taxes to his therapies. Another benefit my family has appreciated is the increased standard deduction. Expanding the standard deduction has limiting major itemized deductions simplified our tax filing process, and it's helped us as a family make decisions based on our lives rather than the tax rules. A third provision of the TCJA that helped my family is the change in the marginal tax rates. Over the years, my husband and I have worked hard, earning additional degrees, certifications, and receiving promotions to grow in our careers, and as a result, our taxable income has increased. Within the TCJA, we saw immediate savings. If these reduced marginal tax rates were to sunset, our family would see an immediate tax increase, and that would directly impact our family budget and the resources we have for our children. That's the personal side of my testimony, but given my background in public finance, I also want to give you my professional perspective on the impact TCJA will have on Iowa families. Iowa's tax structure draws upon the federal code as a starting point for calculating our state income taxes, and so the TCJA has ramifications for us on that side as well. Our state once had 9 income tax brackets with a top rate of 8.98%. But starting next year, we will have a flat tax and a rate of 3.8%. State-level policymakers have worked to reduce the tax burdens on Iowans, but sunset of the TCJA would erode some of those tax savings. In 2018, state lawmakers conformed our state tax policy to many of the TCJA provisions, so a sunset of the federal tax policies will present a problem. Iowa will have to figure out how to maintain a less complex tax system for Iowans that does not result in a tax increase while still conforming to federal tax policy. As a policy expert, and more importantly as a mom, I can testify that the increased tax liability would hurt my family and many others, both at the federal and state level. My family's tax burden directly affects the amount of income my husband and I can spend on our 3 young children, and the pressure on us to spend time away from them working. Having a child with special needs makes us especially sensitive. As Iowans, we feel like lawmakers in our state have worked hard for us to keep more of our income by lowering the top rates and simplifying our tax structure. As an American, I ask you to look to Iowa and the other states that have enacted similar reforms in response to the request of families across America for lower taxes. Thank you for your time and the consideration of my testimony today.
Thank you. Ms. Reason, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to Iowa. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and to commend you for holding this important hearing on tax implications that impact family farms across Iowa and the rest of the United States. My name is Jolene Reason. I am a farmer and current president of the Iowa Corn Growers Association that has a membership of over 7,500 farmers and agribusiness associates. My organization takes its direction from our grassroots memberships, and by allowing me to speak today, you will be hearing their concerns through me in addition to my own personal experiences for my crop and cattle operation in Northwest Iowa. As a farmer, we are at a critical juncture. Currently, commodity prices will not cover the cost of production, let alone the extra monies to be spent in the community, hurting our rural and national economies. A strong farm economy makes for a strong national economy. That is why a good tax policy is vital to keep family farms in business. Iowa Corn works in conjunction with the National Corn Growers Association, and together we were supportive of your negotiated tax package, H.R. 7024, the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act, and we appreciate your work on these important tax matters like the bonus depreciation and Section 179 provisions. So every year our Corn Grower Association conducts a member survey. We just got the results back. Over 90% of our members say that tax policy is number one to them, and we as an organization need to be focused on that. Tax policy is so important for our farmers to continue to thrive throughout the countryside. So next year, I will be eligible for Medicaid, which means entertaining thoughts about retiring and passing the family farm on to the next generation, or for me, my 2 boys. So I, as so many other farmers, are making plans for passing that farm down to the next generation, and changing tax provisions are a huge part of that estate planning process. So here are my thoughts to you to carry back to Washington. Number 1, leave the estate tax rate at $13.6 million per person and adjust it for inflation annually. Number 2, keep bonus depreciation, which allows us to not only modernize our equipment, but allows us to farm more efficiently. And number 3, keep stepped-up basis, which allows us to transfer ownership of farmland and equipment, reducing capital gains tax for our heirs. If these tax provisions change, it will be catastrophic for us and so many others who need their land and equipment to keep the farm operational. So let me just use my farm as an example. If the current estate tax rate stays at 13.6, I will be able to successfully pass my ground and equipment to my boys without placing them in a tax liability position. However, if the current level is reduced back to $6 million, here's what's going to happen. My boys will either have to sell all the equipment and 70 acres, or they're going to have to sell 275 acres of land and be able to keep the equipment. Both choices, in my book, are unacceptable, since selling 275 acres of ground would mean that over half of the land that they stand to inherit is going to be gone. And for me, it would be destroying what their dad and I worked so hard to build. So our story is more common than not. Currently, 97% of farms are family-owned in the United States. So you will be decimating what helped build the strong American farm economies we know today. With the possible sale of the land to pay the estate tax, chances are it's going to be a larger farmer that buys that ground, not a beginning or a small farmer, which would add to the vertical integration that's already going on in the countryside. Plus, now let's add the taxes of the sale of that land and equipment. So then let's go to town and try and find a local lender to set up finance and to be able to buy that equipment, to be able to buy that land back. And if successful, the interest rates are going to be incredibly high just due to the riskiness of that loan. Couple that with the depressed farming commodity prices that we have today, and oh, by the way, corn's down another 6 cents today, will make it next to impossible to service that amount of tax debt. So basically destroying any chance of my sons continuing to farm the operation that has been in our family for close to 100 years. I know this is a lot to think about, but I want to leave you with this. The current tax provisions are essential to preserving family farms and farming throughout the United States. Protecting these policies is key to ensuring that we can pass our farms on to the next generation, because when we protect farming and farms, we protect our communities, we protect our food, and we protect our fuel. All things that have and will keep our country strong and keep the United States the envy of other nations. Thank you for this opportunity to provide this testimony today. And I do have one final request. And I know this is a big ask, but please, 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 pass a farm bill this year. My dad... So I come from a family of 6 kids, and needless to say, we fought a lot. And my dad would always say, you got to work along and you got to get along. My dad's 90 years old. He still farms. So I want you to take that advice back to D.C. You got to work along and you got to get along. And I would certainly hope that we see some promise in getting that farm bill passed. And one more thing, you have a key chain there by you. You folks are the key to getting this farm bill passed, to getting these tax policies back on the farm for us. So please, I know that's kind of a corny gift, but it's so important, the things that you folks will do for us out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Amen to that. Let's pass that farm bill. Mr. Sukup, you're recognized.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Smith, and all to the distinguished members joining us. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today at this important hearing. It's a special time in our community, and we're grateful to host you. My name is Steve Sukup. I'm President and CEO of Sukup Manufacturing. We're located just up Interstate 35 in Sheffield, Iowa, and I'm proud to say that we are the largest family-owned and operated manufacturer of grain storage, drying, and equipment. For over 60 years, Sukup has been a critical part of the U.S. food supply. We sell in every state represented here throughout the Midwest and from California to New York. Our company is located in Congressman Feenster's district, and I'd like to thank him for being here today and our entire Iowa delegation. The tax reform bill of 2017 was a shot in the arm for manufacturers across our sector. Sukup has grown over the past decades, but nothing compares to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act when it was signed into law. For example, thanks to lowering the corporate tax rate to 21%, Sukup grew our workforce by a third, adding 200 well-paying manufacturing jobs in our community. The key to Sukup's success has not only been our culture, but our dedication to creating and pushing our industry forward. Sukup has held over 100 U.S. patents. We're pioneering ways to make grain storage and drying more safe, profitable, and efficient for farmers and ranchers across the country. This is largely made possible by massive investments in research and development. In the years following tax reform, Sukup increased our R&D investment by several $1 million, with 95% of that money going towards engineering and staff wages, bringing well-paying jobs to Iowa. One of these critical R&D investments is our safety homes. When a catastrophic earthquake struck Haiti in 2010, Sukup's safety manager wanted to develop an efficient, quickly assembled home from one of our grain bins to provide relief. I encouraged him to build a prototype, and today our safety homes, as you can see here on the fairgrounds today, are changing lives worldwide. We also developed the world's largest 2.2 million bushel bin for ethanol plants. That is big enough to house a Boeing 767. But yes, the landing is difficult, even for you, Congressman Nunn. So. Unfortunately, after being part of our tax code for 70 years, the expiration of immediate R&D expensing has made it harder for us to invest in the technologies and products of the future. Congress should immediately reinstate the expensing of R&D so manufacturers like Sukup can continue to innovate. Following the passage of the 2017 tax law, Sukup went from roughly $5 million in capital spending to almost $15 million per year, thanks to the 100% accelerated depreciation. This allowed us to fund new equipment purchases and fulfill our mission of providing Sukup employees with reliable, safe, and efficient equipment. Unfortunately, full expensing began to expire in 2023. We believe that was a mistake, as it is common sense that our tax code should encourage investment that leads to growth. Many manufacturing teams, including our company, would benefit from seeing this provision restored, and Congress should do it immediately. An accountant once told me, if you don't have some debt, that means you're not coming up with new ideas. Well, many manufacturers like us borrow monies to finance essential long-term investments. Tax reform made it less expensive to take business loans, which manufacturers use to invest and grow their operations. Unfortunately, this Progrowth standard expired in 2022 as well, making debt financing much more expensive. We're also counting on you to preserve tax reform's sensible changes to the estate tax so that we can ensure the third and fourth generations of Sukups can continue in our family business. Discussing tax policy before Congress is something of a tradition in our family. About 20 years ago, my father, Eugene Sukup, testified before the Senate Finance Committee, along with Warren Buffett. Since then, thanks to tax reform, we have had an incredible growth streak in our business, and every one of our employees and customers has benefited. I urge you to keep that growing streak going. Maintaining the 21% corporate rate, as well as the tax provisions I just described, are so important to manufacturers everywhere. Because of these policies, we've been able not only to maintain our business, to provide great living, health benefits, and soon expanded child care for our employees and in our community, even as we aid those in need around the globe. Again, thank you for being here today, and thank you for looking ways to keep Sukup Manufacturing a rural Iowa success story. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pohl, you are now recognized.
Good morning, Chairman Smith, members of the House Committee on Ways and Means, and members of the Iowa delegation. My name is Lana Paul, and I own a number of small businesses here in Iowa. My businesses are Giddings Incorporated, a local and regional trucking company, GI Warehouse Corporation, which specializes in commercial warehousing and logistics, Creative Inspiration and Embroidery Promotional and Customer Fulfillment Company, Mobility Sales and Service, and Outdoor Power Equipment Trailer and Small Tractor Dealer, and Odyssey Spas, which sells hot tubs and provides services for pools and spas. I thank you for this opportunity to discuss how tax policy impacts small businesses like mine here in the Midwest. Entrepreneurship runs deep in my family. My father, Delroy Wayne Giddings, founded Giddings Incorporated in 1972 in Pella, Iowa. 3 years later, he expanded his operations to nearby Knoxville with GI Warehouse Corporation. I joined his companies in 1975 and worked for many years with my family running these businesses. With the retirement of my brothers a few years ago, today I fully own these businesses and operate them with my children. My children share our family's passion for entrepreneurism, and I own and operate Mobility Sales and Services, Odyssey Spas, and Creative Inspirations with them. It is my hope that each of these businesses will pass on to future generations in our family. While each of my businesses has their own purposes and their own unique challenges, they have all directly benefited from the policies in the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, TCJA, aimed at growing small businesses. And they would each face challenges should these provisions expire. Today, I would particularly like to focus on 3 provisions that are critical to our operations. The Small Business Deduction, 199A, created under TCJA, the expansion of the bonus depreciation and small business expensing in TCJA, and the estate tax. Each of my businesses operate as pass-through, and that is the business earnings flow through my individual tax returns. Like other pass-through companies, the Small Business Deduction Section, Section 199A, created in TCJA, has provided multiple opportunities for me to reinvest and grow my businesses. Because of this deduction, I was able to give my employees the largest compensation increase that we have been able to provide in many years, which in turn has helped our efforts to retain employees, something that has not always been easily recently. Additionally, we're able to invest $2 million to build a nearly 40,000 square foot expansion of GI Warehouse Corporation and expand our fleet of truck at Giddings. Our businesses have also benefited from the expansion of the expensing provision in TCJA. Under TCJA, full expensing for equipment could be recognized in the year of purchase instead of having to amortize cost over additional years through depreciation. This change allowed us to consistently add trucks and trailers to our fleet at Giddings Incorporated. In fact, the first year of this expansion, we were able to purchase and immediately expense 6 new semi-trucks, and until recently, we have been able to continue this expansion. However, recently, we have had to implement a freeze on purchasing any new equipment. This is due to the uncertainty of the tax provisions at the end of 2025 and because of the increased cost of equipment. In fact, in 2018, we purchased trucks for $158,000 each. In 2022, the truck costs $251,000 each. If these TCJA provisions were allowed to fully expire or otherwise be limited, it will create another hurdle to expanding our fleet in the future. Finally, like many family-owned businesses, the impact of the estate tax on a small business has become more real to me recently. My husband unexpectedly passed away earlier this year. At the time of passing, we were working on our estate planning, including succession planning for our family businesses. Each of my businesses is rooted in family operations. My hope for all of them is that they were not only passed on to my children, but their children as well. While I agree with others that this tax should be eliminated entirely if Congress does not at least act to preserve the expanded exemption of the estate tax under TCJA, it will be increasingly harder to pass family-owned businesses from generation to generation. If nothing else today, I want to stress to the committee that protecting small business is good for America. Small businesses are the foundation of the American economy. Without action, 30 million small businesses in the United States will be faced with a massive tax hike, which will hurt their ability to create jobs and give back to their communities. I urge Congress to act swiftly to provide small business with the certainty that they need to make these provisions permanent. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. I want to thank each one of our witnesses. We will now move to the question and answer portion. Ms. Curry, as a mother of 3 young boys, very young boys, you know as well as anyone the joys but also the challenges that can come with raising kids. One policy that I have long championed is the child tax credit. This pro-working family tax policy was created, I like to point out, by a Republican Congress back in 1997 and strengthened by a Republican Congress in the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Where the Trump tax cuts are set to expire at the end of next year, the child tax credit will be slashed in half from $2,000 to $1,000. And as a parent, what would that mean to your family, and what more should Congress consider doing with the child tax credit to make it even more helpful to families like yours?
I mean, every dollar that my husband and I earn that we get to keep goes towards our children. Like I said, Isaac, he's in speech therapy, occupational therapy. We're waiting for behavioral therapy. It's all very, very expensive. Health insurance doesn't cover everything. You know, Benjamin needed speech therapy because the little booger didn't want to talk when he turned 2. So it's just, you know, expenses like that. You know, the water heater goes out. The furnace went out right after Philip was born. And so looking at when we file our taxes, it happened early spring, and in Iowa it's still very cold then. So that was actually a really reprieve. You know, I didn't have to pay a whole lot extra in taxes. We got a little bit back, and it helped with that. So, you know, taxes affect my grocery bill. They affect my gas tank. They really, really do impact my kitchen table. So I would just ask, I mean, for nothing else, just keep it where it is at $2,000. An expansion would be very grateful, especially for those young children. Early intervention is new. It wasn't around when I was young, and so those services do cost more money, so maybe expanding it more for younger children versus older children would be an option to help. But really, reducing it by any amount would negatively impact my family, my children, and really specifically our ability to pay for services.
Thank you. Ms. Reason, as a family farmer, you know how important it is that your farming equipment is up to date. It's about delivering the best product to your customers and about keeping your employees safe. I know how important it is to make sure your equipment and tools are up to date and helping you get the most out of your land to deliver goods to market faster, more efficiently, and in greater yields. But this investment comes at a tremendous cost, which is why Congress included the immediate 100% expensing for machines and equipment in the Trump tax cuts back in 2017. However, that provision has already begun to phase out. It was 80% last year, it'll be 60% this year, 40% next year, and then 20%. What has been the impact, and what will the future look like for family farms like yours if Congress does not address this critical piece of the tax code?
So my first thought is, if you like to eat, you will help us with this. So and from my experience this spring, our combine last fall was having issues. We looked at it this spring. To fix it was going to be basically $80,000. The combine's worth $120,000. So guess what? We had to get a different combine. If I wanted a brand new one, which my boys thought should happen, that's $750,000. $750,000 for 2025. I'm like, wow, that could buy me a tremendous retirement home. So, but I couldn't do that to the boys. So anyway, ended up buying a $450,000 one. And so, you know, when you buy that piece of equipment, you're expected to pay it off in 3 to 7 years. That's usually what the finance is at. So those are pretty hefty bills that come to play. So being able to use that 100% depreciation, now it just freed up money so I can make those payments. You know, people have 20 years, 20, 30 years to buy a house. Nope, a piece of equipment that is worth more than what a house is, I got to pay off in 3 to 5 years, 3, maybe 7, if you talk well to your banker. So by having that, it allows me to make improvements on my farm, to which, okay, so I kind of liken it to a cell phone. How many have a flip phone or a bag phone anymore? We want new technology. We need new technology on our farms in order to continue to be competitive out there. And by being able to use this, we're staying in the ball game.
So, Mr. Sukup, we know that sound tax policy can help America's businesses grow and innovate. We see the spirit of innovation every day, from American manufacturers to our family farmers. America's farmers are some of the best innovators in the world, as they are consistently researching ways to get more out of their land for today and future generations of farmers. In the 2017 Trump tax cuts, it sparked an 18% increase in investment in research and development in this country. As a business owner, what impact did the 2017 tax cuts have on your decision making, and what would the current lapse in the ability to immediately expense R&D investment have meant to your capabilities to invest, innovate, or grow?
Well, going back to that 2017, we then switched to where we were doing about $5 million a year in research and development. We then started increasing that. We went up to $15 million, and what that did was reinvest machinery. We're manufacturing, so it's very heavy capital-intensive equipment, but it provides our employees to be more safe and efficient, and provide us to be able to put better products to our customers across the Midwest, across the world. And also with the lower tax rate, that was when we started a clinic actually in our manufacturing plant facility. Our third generation, my daughter Emily came up and said, worked with some of our HR folks and said our employees would really like this. Well, we reinvested into our employees. It's been a perfect fit for us for the clinic on site. We're doing child care because that's so important to families throughout our community, and for us to have them have a safe environment for their kids, but also to be able to come in and work at Sukup at the manufacturing jobs.
Ms. Pohl, as an owner of 4 small businesses are the foundation of our country's economy. You know how difficult it can be for Main Street businesses to compete with larger corporations who are taxed at a lower rate rather than as a so-called pass-through entity. Here in Iowa, pass-through businesses account for nearly half of all employment in the state. Across the U.S., 98% of our family farms, which account for more than 90% of our agriculture production, are also pass-through entities. What would it mean for your business if the 20% small business deduction that was included in the Trump tax cuts were to expire, and you face an effective tax rate of over 43.4%, while the company Mrs. DeWalt works for pays 21%?
That would be just devastating. You know, large companies also have so many other advantages that we don't have. You know, they also have the ability to make more money than we do. So when we get hit with these large tax increases and it's unfair, for small businesses to have so much more than they do. So it takes that money out of our pocket, and it takes it so we can't reinvest. We can't give raises. We have to compete against large companies for our employees. And so it's not always as easy to pay the wages that they can, have the benefits that they can. So we've used that benefit to give the wages, and so if it gets taken away, I think it's going to be harder and harder for us to be able to compete.
Thank you. Ms. DeWalt, during the Obama administration, prior to enactment of the 2017 Trump tax cuts, we saw over 25 major corporate inversions occur where businesses moved their headquarters and jobs overseas to fly the flag of another country. The Trump tax cuts made several changes to make it more competitive for U.S. businesses to be located and do business here in the United States. Can you talk specifically about some of those changes and how they can impact the decisions by U.S. businesses to keep their operations here in the U.S.?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Smith. So the corporate rate prior to TCJA was uncompetitive on a global scale. So the reduction certainly encourages businesses to invest in the U.S. So at the Home Depot, we are predominantly domestic. And the reduction of the corporate tax rate to 21% enabled us to make significant investments in wage of $2 billion, permanent investments in wage of $2 billion, enhancing our supply chain, $1.2 billion, 18,000 jobs. So it's in our business decision making, we factor in the corporate rate and other factors when we make all of our decisions about pricing, about wage, about expansion, and other investments. It is key to have a competitive 21% rate in the United States for companies like ours to continue this level of investment.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Feenstra.
Thank you, and thank you again to all the witnesses. You know, you think about tax, and if you reduce tax, you give families, businesses more money to do different things. We just heard about that. What it also does, it increases revenue to our country. Yeah, this is a shocker. In 2017, under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we dramatically reduced taxes. And you know what happened? It grew our economy, and we brought in record number of revenue. What does that do? That will help us reduce our debt, our $35 trillion debt, if we continue to grow. That's why I'm so passionate about it. The other thing I'm passionate about is tax inequity. There's a lot of tax inequity. One specific one is the death tax, estate tax. We got rid of it in the state of Iowa. I was a big proponent of that, but we haven't got rid of it at the federal government. I have 170 some members that have signed on to my bill to get rid of the death tax. It's a pilfer tax. Think about it this way. You collect all this land throughout your life, you die, and all of a sudden your family members got to pay 42% tax on that land. Think about that, 42%. That is wrong in so many ways. So, Mr. Sukup, I want to ask you, you're talking about the third and fourth generation coming down the pipe. How will this affect you if you have to pay that 42%?
Our third generation is in the office every day. We have 6 members of our third generation. They enjoy coming to Sheffield every day and working throughout the different jobs of our manufacturing. But to be able to pass it on, that would just be overwhelming and not possible.
Yeah, it'd just be a killer, absolutely. And all of a sudden, that next generation is lost.
That family business closes or leaves the community.
That's exactly right. And that happens to small business and our main streets day and time again. I want to talk about something else that's so important to Iowa. You think about right now, over 50% of our crop, corn and soybeans, goes to biofuels. Every other row virtually goes to biofuels. Right now, if you look at our commodity prices, our corn is under $4, our soybeans are under 10. Right now, we could export more or we could use more of it. How do you use more? You do it through biofuels, ethanol and biodiesel. To do that, we got to grow our market through sustainable aviation fuels and other things. So I want to talk about 45Z. right? This is a tax credit that can dramatically expand these markets and, in essence, put us on the same foothold as electric vehicles. So right now, we have a thumb on the scale for electric vehicles and not liquid fuels. This gives us an opportunity to compete, and if we don't, we're going to probably see our commodity prices cut nearly in half again. Mrs. Reason, can you talk about this?
You bet. So that 45Z is going to be a game changer for us out there when it comes to the grain price, because with the 45Z, the nation and our domestic consumers are asking for low carbon. So one way of doing that is through carbon sequestration, and this 45Z helps ethanol plants get set up to be able to do that. So when we do that, my corn that goes to that ethanol plant now, I'm not expecting to get a lot of corn, any tax return back from that, but what it does is make markets, and it makes better prices. But the only way that's going to happen is if we specifically say that we use the corn that is produced domestically. Yes. Because at this point in time, our friends down in Brazil are importing their ethanol into Georgia to make sustainable aviation fuels. And my understanding is they will qualify for this tax cut, this 45Z. We can't let that happen. I'm sorry. I mean, I love all farmers, but not that much.
We need to use domestic feedstock. We can't use stock from around the world.
And so a recent study I just saw is, so for every dollar invested in that 45Z tax credit, well, it'll return $4 to $6 for every dollar invested. So I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry. I think this is a no-brainer, but you got to take it back to Congress and get that happening.
Thank you for that. I just want to tell everybody, we have to remind ourselves that when our farmers are successful, our main streets are successful, our hospitals, our schools, everything is successful. And when our commodity prices are where they're at, we're going to feel it this fall, right? No one's going to buy a vehicle or a piece of equipment or a bin, whatever. That's why it's so important that we have 45Z and make sure we have ethanol.
Right.
Thanks. So I yield back. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hinson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk a little bit more about something that's already been discussed today, and that is the child tax credit and the expansion of that under the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Doubled the tax credit, increased its refundability, and raised that income threshold. And all that does is it makes it so that more families, more hardworking Iowa families and American families can access that credit. So building on that foundation, I actually introduced a package of bills called the Providing for Life Act. It really prioritizes the needs of our families and ensures that they have the resources to thrive. It would expand the child tax credit, include provisions for paid family leave, support for expecting parents and pregnancy centers, and it would specifically increase the refundable child tax credit up to $3,500 for kids under the age of 18 and $4,500 for kids under the age of 6. Also expanding the credit to unborn babies during a woman's pregnancy. So in addition to that, it would also make the adoption tax credit fully refundable. This would help people like my colleague, Mr. Nutt over here, who have taken it upon themselves to adopt children and expand their families. Kids deserve to have a loving, happy family, and this can help with that. So by broadening access to these benefits and in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and then legislation like what I've proposed, it would help to reduce child poverty. It would alleviate financial pressure on real working families who often face these unique challenges, such as limited job opportunities, longer commutes, and higher costs for those essential services. So, Mrs. Curry, I just wanted to ask you, when you hear about the expansions that I just talked about, even above and beyond the child tax credit, would those resources and having conversations with your neighbors in rural America really help families like yours?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the expansion of the child tax credit would, without a doubt, help myself and my neighbors and others. Being a part of the autism community, I know a lot of families that are also struggling and constantly looking for support or different services, and they're not cheap, let me tell you. But there are kids. You can't say no. It's what they need to be fully functioning adults one day and to, really just exist in society. So expanding that for young children, I think that's so valuable. I can't tell you the number of doctor's appointments we've gone to for a heart murmur or you know, having to find a specialist pediatric ophthalmologist because we didn't know, you know, if they were seeing well, and so all of those expenses, right? And parents are just trying to do the best job they can for their kids. And it's expensive, and it's getting more and more expensive. I can tell you, when I go to Sam's Club to buy chicken nuggets and fruit for my kids, the price just keeps going up and up and up. And you know, I buy milk 3 gallons at a time, and it's getting more and more expensive. So again, expanding that child tax credit would help families like mine and really help like our kitchen table.
Yeah. I have a 13-year-old now, so we feel you on the personal level. I had no idea how much 13-year-old boys eat. It's really gross to watch me eat sometimes, but certainly feel that in my grocery bill. And I'm sure much like you, I see those expenses tack up, and add up. So I want to move to domestic manufacturing because obviously that's such an important part of our rural economy here, and we've seen and heard already about the investments in businesses creating those jobs right here in rural America. And our foreign adversaries like China continue to ramp up their investment in work and research to gain control of our critical supply chains. So I think it's never been more important for Congress to really commit to pro-growth policies that help American leadership on the global stage. So getting to that investment, Mr. Sukup, as a business owner, can you speak to the importance of this tax policy that keeps us competitive, not just here at home, but on that world stage? Because you sell your equipment all over the world, so you see those impacts day to day.
Yes, we export containers every week out of our company. It goes across the globe. Being able to have whether it's the depreciation or the lower tax rate, lets us reinvest into our manufacturing. And I think over the last 4 years with the COVID and everything, you've seen how important manufacturing and domestic manufacturing is. And so this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is just critical for us to continue with that aggressive mode.
So if these cuts are allowed to expire, and you've talked about a lot of the growth you've experienced, that'll mean some hard decision making for you and your family.
Yes. No, there'd be some pullback. So far, our markets have stayed strong, and we've added 200 well-paying manufacturing jobs, and our intent is to keep everybody busy. Yeah, well, certainly doing a great job of that. So thank you so much for coming today, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. It's great to have Dr. Miller Meeks with us. We'll recognize you for an opening statement and for your questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman Smith and the Ways and Means Committee for holding this incredibly important hearing here today in the heartland of America, in Iowa, at the greatest state fair in the country, the Iowa State Fair. And I also want to thank our 5 witnesses for taking the time to be here. You represent the best of America, real people facing real problems, asking for real solutions. The 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act significantly transformed the American economy, fostering an environment that stimulated growth, improved the financial well-being of millions of Americans. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act provided much-needed relief for families by lowering federal tax rates across all income levels. As a result, low and middle-income households experienced an increase in disposable income, enabling them to invest in their homes, save for education, and enhance their quality of life. Businesses of all sizes were also major beneficiaries of the TCJA. With lower tax rates, companies had more resources to invest in research and development, infrastructure, and workforce training. As companies reinvested in their operations, productivity increased and wages rose for American earners. And as the chair of the Conservative Climate Caucus, Ms. Reason, your comments on the equipment that you can buy, if you're concerned about climate, as our colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are not here today, you would want farmers to be able to invest in the most up-to-date equipment that leads to precision agriculture and less inputs. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act catalyzed a period of economic growth and opportunity for families, small businesses, and corporations alike. By lowering tax rates and encouraging investment, the TCJA not only enhanced financial security for millions of Americans, but also positioned the United States economy for long-term success. In conclusion, the expiration of the 2017 Trump tax cuts would not only impose significant tax increases on middle-class families, but also hinder economic growth and stability. It would disproportionately impact small businesses, lead to job losses, and diminish the competitive position of American companies in the global market, as Representative Hinson alluded to. As we look toward a future of economic recovery and growth, at a time when commodity prices are low, at a time when the national debt is high, it's critical that Congress act to extend and protect these vital tax policies, ensuring that American families, workers, and small businesses can thrive. The success of our economy, and indeed our nation, relies on a tax framework that promotes investment, encourages job creation, and promotes financial security for all Americans. Thank you. Mrs. Curry, thank you for being here with us today. I understand that you had your first child back around the same time that the child tax credit was doubled from $1,000 to $2,000 under the Trump tax cuts. And like Representative Hinson, I also have signed on to legislation that would extend the child tax credit during pregnancy. As a mom of 3 here in Iowa, can you describe to us the impact that the child care tax credit after 2017 had on you and your family?
Yes, the impact the child tax credit had on me after the birth of my first son, in that first year we had the smaller amount, and so we owed additional taxes when we filed, and so we definitely felt the pinch there, new parents and having additional taxes due. The following year was the first year in a long time we got a refund, and it was a welcome kind of breath of fresh air. We didn't have to stress so much. So yes, the expansion of the child tax credit had an immediate impact, noticeable impact in my family.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that provision is set to expire at the end of 2025, which would cut the child care tax credit in half, impacting millions of working families across the country who depend on the child tax credit to help support their children. And I think you've elucidated well what the impact would be, especially when you're commuting in rural Iowa to jobs. Ms. Pohl, you're from my district, the beautiful city of Pella. Thank you for being here with us today. What are some of the challenges that you face running a small family-owned business here in Iowa? And what tax provisions have helped relieve some of those challenges?
I think our largest challenge is the low unemployment that's here in Iowa. To get qualified workers, we're constantly competing against large businesses, and we don't always have the opportunity to be able to pay the same wages, have the same benefits that they do. So we were able to take the 20% deduction and give large raises to our employees. We added a few more benefits to them, and we also were able to add to our starting wage. So it allows us to be more competitive. And coming from Pella, Iowa, that has Pella Corporation, Vermeer Manufacturing, neighboring 3M in Knoxville and Hormel, we compete against a large businesses for a small area.
I think the Trump tax cuts, as you said, created the 20% small business deduction that benefited Main Street businesses such as yourself across America and in small communities. However, the Biden-Harris administration has all but said that they would let this provision expire after 2025, increasing Main Street's effective rate to 43.4%. And I think, as you indicated, in order for small businesses and entrepreneurs to exist in our country, which is the backbone of the American economy, we need to have those provisions in place. And can you talk to us a little bit more about the removal of the small business deduction, what it would mean for your family business?
Right now, especially with the economy the way it is and with inflation the way it is, we're getting hit from all sides, whether it's increase in equipment, increase in parts, increase in labor costs. Warehouses have gone up, almost doubled to buy and build a new warehouse at this point. So now we're getting increases also in the insurance costs for that, because we do replacement costs on it. So every place that we look at, we're getting increases, property taxes. And by having this, if this increases too, we're going to have to look really, really hard at, how we're going to be able to make it through the next while.
It's difficult when you're getting hit on all sides and your federal government isn't helping to prevent it. Ms. Reason, can you explain how the option of using bonus depreciation to modernize equipment has affected the productivity and efficiency of your farm and your ability to plan for future growth and expansion?
So my 2 boys who are currently farming with me, I lost my husband 5 years ago to cancer, and so this bonus depreciation, the death tax, stepped-up basis are all, I have lived it, and I'm telling you right now that by losing that, you are decimating the next generation of farmers coming down the tubes. So, but to get to your depreciation part of it, by being able to upgrade equipment, so that the combine I was talking to you about this year, that be great to live in if I could, but anyway, so it's going to have the GPSing, it's going to have it will have the ability to communicate with the other combine, so that when it comes time for, say you're in a super big field and you're not sure if you got everything done, it will tell you where there's areas that have to be farmed yet. So then instead of driving from one side of the farm to the other because you forgot a strip out there, it takes care of that. So I'm saving fuel, and that's reducing my carbon carbon emissions, because the new equipment is way more effective as far as for the emissions part. So and the mapping and the list goes on. So like I say, to me it's like, am I going to use a bag phone out there to harvest, or am I going to use the best iPhone possible in order to do my job as quickly and as efficiently as possible?
And very, very briefly, because I'm over time, would you say that also applies to the 199A small business credit? Is it equally important?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Nunn is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Thank you again for the group for being here today and offering real Iowa common sense on how a tax policy not only helps grow an economy, but helps everyday working families. So, Mrs. Curry, as not only a fellow Iowan, but here in the district together, and if all the titles you have, with a family farm, working a nonprofit, leading advocacy for kids with autism, I think your best title is probably mom. And the reality is here, you are reflective of 30% of Iowans who benefit from this tax credit. Look, almost 500,000 Iowans qualify for it, and it doubles their ability to have savings. I want to ask you, when you got that tax credit, that money back in your pocket, did you go out and buy an Italian-made Ferrari?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you hostily take over a foreign entity to build it offshore?
No.
What did you do with your tax credit? Because you are reflective of a working class family to be able to help your kids.
We paid our speech therapist, and we took Isaac to a specialist eye doctor, and we bought a new water heater that spring.
Mr. Chairman, that's a real investment back in our economies here. Most importantly, it's a real investment in our families and our kids' future. That's exactly what this tax credit's meant to do, and it is so very important that we continue to extend it into the future. It's one of the reasons that I'm proud to be leading the Keeping Siblings Act together as parents, also as a foster dad, which I share with Mr. Smith here on the committee as well, and as foster parents, being able to help those generation of kids be successful, hugely important for our future. Thank you, Mrs. Curry, for everything that you do. Mrs. Paul, I want to talk with you as well. Look, you're a small business owner. Iowa is home to over 270,000 small businesses. In fact, here in Iowa, we have an outsized voice. 99% of businesses in Iowa are identified as small businesses. Being able to really help make this up is huge. Now, if these tax credits expire, 92% of Main Street businesses in Iowa would experience a 43% plus tax increase. I think it's fair to say that would decimate a lot of our small towns and communities, not just here in Iowa, across the country. Would you be able to keep your supply chain going if you had tax increases like this levied on your door instantaneously?
I think it's going to be tough. I am scared what's going to happen if it does expire, because I've seen small businesses already closing in Iowa, especially in the restaurant industry, unfortunately, and with everything that's happening and the cost of everything, with inflation, we're getting hit so hard the way it is. And then if we're going to be paying these kind of increases, we've had a really rough 2 years across the board with my businesses. So we're already hurting. So with this happening, it could be devastating to us and across the board for Iowa and the United States.
And Mrs. Paul, I think you're absolutely right here. You talk about a ripple-on effect. An increase in your trucking business means an increase for everyone in America with a supply chain that costs a lot more if you're paying more taxes. Tell me the opposite. If we're able to extend the tax cut, how does that help out bringing down prices for every American?
Well, that's great because we can continue to invest, and we do. The money doesn't come back into our pockets.
That's right.
As small business owners, we reinvest. We reinvest in the communities, we reinvest in our employees, and that's the thing we will continue to do.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I'm proud to support the Main Street Tax Credit Certainty Act. It's one of the things we've done to make this permanent, so you have permanency in your reinvestment here in our communities and growing across the country. Ms. Reeson, I should just call you Farmer Reeson. You've been working with us so hard to highlight the success of an investment in America's ag, America's energy, America's national security. You're a practitioner in this. Look, the 2017 tax cuts offered us an explosive growth opportunity for reinvestment. It also increased U.S. investment by 20% and provided a crucial death tax exemption, something that we want to make sure we see increased. Talk to me about how your family farm is investing in these new innovations, things like sustainable aviation fuel, 45Z tax credit. It's helping us grow our domestic energy production. Are these tax credits really the innovation of the future that you're using on the farm?
Oh, holy cow. I can't believe you're even asking me that. For me, that's a no-brainer. I mean, as a farmer, when I am getting tax breaks to help invest in invest in markets and to invest in trade, when I have trade, I have security in my market. I have better markets because more people are competing for what I'm growing. So, and just thinking as a farmer, so every dollar I spend in the community, now it gets rolled 6 times.
Yes, Ms.
So
it's
like, so the people that I touch with what I'm doing for, the farming sector of it, it's huge. So, and just know that any monies that, everybody likes less tax. And so any monies that we do manage to save gets invested right back into equipment or maintenance or whatever else happens to come up. We have livestock, and so
that's right.
We have way more equipment probably than what anybody else does in the countryside.
Thank you, Ms. Reeson. These are not just tax credits;
you.
These are tax investments. As you highlight, every dollar invested are multi-dollars returned. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield my time.
Thank you. Mr. Smith is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our entire panel and everyone participating here today. It's great to see the entire Iowa delegation here. It doesn't surprise me because they show up. It's great to work together on things like biofuels, where we can stick together. I happen to be from Nebraska, and where we have a few biofuels and other similar industries in Nebraska. But we work together, and I think that's important. And we take from you your perspectives and apply them. And I'm grateful to have been a part of passing the original Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the work and the diligence that went into that when we happened to have the votes in 2017. We started working on that long before we had the votes. And I think it's important to note that the diligence we are doing right now, this very moment, thanks to our chairman here, scheduling meetings, gatherings such as this, is hearing from you as we move forward. Now, I think it's important to note that we see TCJA as a very successful tool for growing our economy. I'm glad we did that before COVID and the disruption in supply chains and various dynamics. I'm also grateful when we can hear from a company that pays more in taxes now than they did before, and they're happy about it because they have the ability to pay that. And that might be a company, that might be individuals as well. But I think it is our job to hear from you and to dig down, to look for those details so that we can hopefully help form the future for more opportunity for future generations and pay down this debt that our country has accumulated. And so, in the run-up to 2017 tax reform, it's important to note that even Barack Obama realized we were not competitive on the corporate side. We were losing, as the chairman pointed out, we were losing American companies, strong American companies, to relocation to other tax jurisdictions because it was more favorable. A very logical move, by the way. And even Barack Obama, like I said, noticed that we needed to be more competitive. So now he endorsed a lower corporate rate, and we wanted to be very certain that we would be very competitive, and that's why we chose the 21% rate, as low as we possibly could, and still have the resources for family credits and standard deduction, doubling the standard deduction, various components here. But I think it's very compelling when we hear from folks who are paying more in taxes now than they were before, and they're happy about it. And it's instructive moving forward. But Ms. DeWalt, I guess it's only appropriate that you're with Home Depot with a last name like DeWalt, right?
It's coincidence.
It's coincidence. Okay, sorry. No advertising there. Can you elaborate a little bit on, the corporate rate, which happens to be paid by some small corporations too, by the way. It's not just large corporations. But I'm glad that you have the footprint that you do. I would imagine some younger folks showing cattle out here at the State Fair probably paid your stores a few visits over time. But can you elaborate on what you did with that 21% rate, those differences? You spoke a little bit about it in your opening, but can you tell us with even more detail how you handled that 21% rate?
Sure. So as I mentioned, our business model has a number of inputs, factors that we consider in investing. And so the decrease in the corporate rate that was 35 down to 21 created an opportunity for us to really focus, double down on investing in our business. And we did so with our supply chain expansion, which increased our footprint, created jobs, and helps us to better serve our customers. We also took care of our associates, which is one of our core values at Home Depot. So we increased wages by $1 billion, permanent wage increase in 2021, and then a second $1 billion wage increase announced last year. Those are permanent, not bonuses, but wage increases. Mm-hmm. We also just completed an acquisition of SRS Distribution, which is a wholesale distributor of building materials, primarily roofing, and that is really going to accelerate how we serve our pro customers. And so small businesses are essential partners to the Home Depot. So they serve us as suppliers. I talked about the 80 suppliers, here in this state. And they also make up a large portion of our pro customers, which is a very big part of our business, and it is growing. And our ability to be competitive with price, to have the materials when and where the pro customer needs them is really helping them better manage their businesses as well. And so we see the business community, corporate and small business, as the ecosystem that drives the economy.
Very good. Thank you. I wish I had more time because I have a lot more questions. But thank you again for being here. Very appropriate topic in an appropriate place. Thank you.
Mr. Schweikert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate, being someone, I'm from the desert. I'm from a place called Scottsdale. And I saw more green in the bus ride here than I think I've seen in my entire state. And they were complaining it was hot yesterday. I'm going, it's 116 at home. We have some real difficult decisions we have to work through over the next year. The fact of the matter is today, 100% of defense of the United States is borrowed money. 100% of government, as you know it, is borrowed money. All Park Service, everything's all borrowed. And about, I was just doing the math, 37% of Medicare is on borrowed money. This year, our income taxes, 45% of it will just pay the interest. Interest is now the second biggest spend in the United States. We need you to grow like crazy. And then we need to find a number of things where we're going to stop spending or do it better, faster, cheaper, adopt technology. And there's technology to crash the price of healthcare, because healthcare is the primary driver of U.S. debt. And Mr. Sukup, you actually hit a couple of things that I really wish we would understand. the investment in research and development, the ability to expense a piece of equipment so you do it better, faster, and safer. You're one of the few people I've ever had use that word safer. Tell me your experience of in those years where you had that expensing and the R&D credits, which is just a depreciation. It's not a tax cut. We just move up the depreciation. How did it change your business?
Well, we were able to incentivize our engineers, staff. We hired individuals to reinvest, research and development, take a look at what we could do better and faster, more efficiently for products for our farmers and ranchers across the country. We take that research and development, put it into action, and it provides us some predictability in the tax.
But did you produce, in that investment in your research and development, did you come up with faster ways or better or safer pieces of equipment that sort of leaped your company forward in those couple of years that you had 100% of it?
Yes, we have developed new grain dryers that we use across the country. We actually have some going into pistachios.
Forgive me for, you'll later on explain what a grain dryer is.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We actually dry pistachios, California and Arizona.
Yep.
And so we use those, and they're looking for high efficiency, reduce the carbon outputs. We look at our carbon footprint, and so it's going to provide better products across the Midwest. We have to compete globally. We do that in manufacturing. When we invest capital equipment with the accelerated depreciation, what has to go along with the equipment? Skilled workers. We bring in skilled manufacturing jobs, and so we're able to grow and expand.
Ms. DeWalt, and so you're my reason the DeWalts are always on sale, right? I just noticed that last month. You've spoken of, and I couldn't find it real quick. Tax reform happens. There's a number of us on this committee that it doesn't just happen. It took years of calculating the money and trying to get the economic effects and what would maximize opportunity. And it turns out the tax receipts that came in after were dramatically higher than we ever expected in our models. How much for Home Depot do you believe of that moving to the 21% rate? How much of it moved into wages, both in the raised wages and the new hires? Would you speculate to guess?
Thank you for the question. What I can say about wages is that with the reduction of the rate to 21%, obviously we have more capital to invest. And so our wages have increased higher than wage inflation. So we have been able to stay ahead of our wage increases to our associates, and now our associates are at or above $15 an hour across our stores.
Thank you, Ms. DeWalt. Mr. Chairman, I will try to find the study, but I had a study last year that showed, and I think, and I'm doing it from memory, 67% of the corporate tax cut went to wages. And with your permission, I'd like to enter that into the record. With that, I yield back.
So ordered. Mr. LaHood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for your valuable testimony today. I also want to thank our friends from Iowa for issuing us a visa to come to your state and be here and participate in the Iowa State Fair. What a great opportunity to be here. I actually went to college in Iowa for 4 years, and it's great to be back. First time at the Iowa State Fair, and so really, really grateful for the opportunity to be here with everybody. My district is contiguous to Iowa. I share a border with Congresswoman Miller Meeks and also with Ashley Hinson. My district's very similar to the districts here in Iowa, a heavy ag district. It's the 10th largest ag district in the country in terms of corn and soybean production. I have 8 ethanol plants that touch my district. We produce a lot of cattle and hogs in our district, and very involved in the biofuels conversation too. And so it's great to be here. And I would just, as I listen to the witnesses here today and hear you articulate the benefits from TCJA, Nobody can do it, I think, better than what you guys have done it, whether it's a large corporation, whether it's a working family, whether it's a small farming operation, a small business, medium-sized business, and an entrepreneur. As you've articulated what TCJA has done for you, I think it's remarkable. And that's why we're doing these field hearings all across the country, is to hear from regular people on what TCJA has done. And as you articulated those things, I thought about everything that we've done with TCJA: reduce taxes, put more money in the pockets of middle class and lower class citizens, created millions of new jobs, hired more people, moved 6 million people out of poverty when we passed TCJA. We repatriated almost $3 trillion back to the United States with TCJA. And the investment that we've seen in small and medium and large businesses has been immense across the country. And so as I think about TCJA, it may be my 8 years in Congress, the vote that we took on TCJA may be the most impactful vote that I've taken. And so grateful to hear you today articulate all of those things on why we need to be focused on this next year for the economy and for our citizenry. And I also think about the Biden-Harris administration. They've chose to remain in D.C. And have proposed $7 trillion in tax hikes, where the Ways and Means Committee has been traveling across the country to hear firsthand about the challenges of working Americans who are currently facing to develop a roadmap to get our economy back to where it was immediately following TCJA in 2017. For example, we have set up tax teams through Chairman Smith, 10 different tax teams that are meeting and getting feedback from across the country. I happen to chair the American Workforce Tax Team, which is considering ways to better utilize the tax code by hiring and retainment of more workers. And all of us are a part of those tax teams. I have a number of questions, but I'll start with you, Mr. Sukum. You mentioned in your testimony that following TCJA, you were able to significantly expand your business operation and hire more workers. Can you provide more detail on how provisions from TCJA allowed you to hire and retain more workers?
Well, the accelerated depreciation on research and development was just critical on that we could take that return on investment. We invested in wages and staff and engineering, provided better products, and our customers liked our products, and we added 200 manufacturing jobs. And with accelerated depreciation, we add capital equipment. We need skilled folks to run that. And so it was, we added 200 individuals over this time period. Excellent.
I mentioned that I have a heavy ag district, and the potential economic growth around the biofuels industry is something, again, I've been very engaged in and spent a lot of time talking. As we look to future tax policy proposals, can you comment on the specific pro-growth initiatives that can better support our farmers and biofuel producers?
Well, it's one that, I think Congressman Feenstra said about practically 1 out of every 2 rows of corn is going to biofuels. It provides us with energy self-sufficiency here in the U.S., which I think is just absolutely critical, and it can provide going into the 45Z to give us more incentives to take less carbon out of our air.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Estes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for our witnesses for being here. It's so heartening to hear your stories, just because it tells about the success that's happened since TCJA was passed, and whether you're talking about research and development or depreciation or being able to go through estate planning or planning your lives, or how you can actually help wages increase. And as we've talked so much during this panel of all the benefits that came out of TCJA, it's so great to be here. We're out of the D.C. bubble, being able to talk to people. I call it the real world out here, away from the D.C. Beltway. Being here at the Iowa State Fair, it's I know a lot like the Kansas State Fair, where people come for the rides and the food and entertainment. But I know also that people come because they want to learn more about what's going on in the agriculture arena, what kind of innovation and ideas that are out there. Of course, not to be competitive, but the Iowa State Fair did start 20 years before the Kansas State Fair did. Also think maybe have better marketing folks. But The one excuse I will use is that the Iowa State Fair was started before Kansas was a state, so we couldn't really call ours a state fair at that point in time. And while we're here, as we talk about all these innovations that Americans are known for, and we learn more about what's going on in terms of how American agriculture feeds and fuels and provides clothing for people around the world. I know it's tough in the rural agriculture communities. I grew up on a family farm. In fact, my mom still lives on the farm that we have back in Kansas. And farmers have benefited for more than a century of technological advances trying to help provide that food and the benefits for the world. Tax Cuts and Jobs Act recognized how valuable that innovation was, and I know as Americans have invented everything from air conditioners to zippers, so innovation strong and part of our way of life here, and we want to make sure we continue to encourage that. I'm chairing the innovation tax team as we go and look at preparations for next year, and we want to make sure that we continue to have a tax code that actually provides and encourages our ability to create and invent and come up with new ideas to actually make the world a better place. Mr. Walt, there's no question that countries like China, which actually provides 10 times the tax credit for research and development now that the United States does, and they're starting to gain. Actually, they've closed the gap on the United States in terms of the amount of research and development done there. Can you share your thoughts on what the United States needs to do to be a global leader in innovation?
Well, I think TCJA went a long way with the provisions that you mentioned. The expensing, R&D focused, bonus depreciation, lower tax rate, globally competitive tax rate. In the Home Depot's view, it certainly has been the most impactful to us to encourage, to allow us to invest. Not only to encourage, but to allow us to invest further in the U.S. We are primarily U.S. We have 2,000 locations here in the U.S. that, serve all communities, large and small, and so the ability to have a competitive rate in the United States, encouraging companies like ours to continue and to increase investments as we have, and to encourage companies, other companies to invest and innovate in the U.S. So I would say that there are some incredibly powerful provisions in TCJA that encourage investment of all kinds in the U.S., innovation and otherwise.
And thank you for that. And as you noted, the 21% is only a portion of the taxes you pay. That's the federal portion. And that, as you said in your remarks, that you pay 24 to 25%, which actually puts us slightly above the developed world in terms of the tax rate still. But it makes us competitive in terms of being able to do that. So we want to make sure that we continue to have the value out of that tax code that encourages businesses to be successful here. Even with the lower tax code, the tax rate at the federal level, we've seen corporate tax rates increase and tax revenue increase. We've seen the royalty tax increase by over $200 billion over the last 7 years, because more research and development, more intellectual property was based in the United States, and that we were able to actually benefit from that as far as federal tax receipts as well. So I know I'm out of time here, but I just want to thank all of you for being here, being able to talk about the positive aspects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act on each of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. RUAC.
Thank you. Ms. Tinney is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses and everyone for being here. This is quite an incredible experience to be at the Iowa State Fair. And I'm from upstate New York, and we have, my district, the newly conceived 24th district, is actually the largest agricultural district in the Northeast, including the largest dairy district. So it's very different than New York City, where my colleague Nicole Malliotakis lives. But Zach Nunn said, so you're basically the Iowa of New York. So yeah, in a way we are. We have an incredible output with ag, and it's really important in our district. But I'm also a small business owner, so I know what it's like to struggle to make payroll, to deal with taxes, and just all those things. And I also want to just, I mean, I think I'm just incredible that you are all here with such a different perspective. Every one of you has a small business perspective, a large business perspective, the child care perspective, but you're all talking about the one thing that changed upstate New York, and we come from the highest tax state, is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It was incredible. I voted for it, and it was always a stunning, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're voting for that from New York. Most of the businesses, as Ms. Pohl said, in our communities are driven by small business owners, including our farmers. And so we are just grateful to all of you for putting it in your words exactly what the catastrophic results could be if we don't continue with these issues. But I wanted to just first start with Ms. Pohl, and you're an NFIB member, as we are. My business is over 40 years as NFIB. They put out great data and great statistics and advocate well for our small business community because we don't have some of the larger issues. But you talked about 199A if it should expire. Could you tell me just briefly what the operational changes you would have to make in the business if that were to happen?
Well, currently, I think what we would do is stop investing. You know, we wouldn't be able to expense out the equipment. You know, we wouldn't have the extra money to reinvest into our employees and anything else that we wanted to pursue.
Well, when you stop investing, you're coasting, and that means you're going downhill. That means you're not preparing for the future. So one of the other things, thank you, and I just want to move a little bit to something a couple of you touched on, especially Mr. Sukup. You talked about this as well as Ms. DeWald. I raised my son as a single parent, but I also took care of my parents who were across the street with serious health conditions, and so I'm part of that sandwich generation. And it was always a struggle to find daycare, and for parents, both men and women. It depends on who stays home, but now it's a mixed opportunity. We talked about like some of the things that we've worked on. I worked on a bill called the PACE Act, and that's promoting affordable child care for everyone and giving employers the opportunity to invest. And I just could touch briefly on if it would help you to get an additional tax credit or benefit to help with child care facilities right on your properties, and maybe you could touch on that as well, Ms. Wall. Yeah.
Well, right now we're in the process. We're hoping to open October 1st, but 112-space child care facility right across the street from our company. Right now, it looks like about 40 of our employees will take advantage of that, and it's just critical to working families. You know, some of the families both are working, whether for us or down the road at Mason City or another community business. But and when if there's families that have two of them in child care, it's just astronomical. And then again, that sort of ties into the estate tax. I don't see that I would have really said yes, let's go do it. But the third generation, daughter Emily, comes to Sheffield every day and she goes, this is important to families, let's do it.
Yeah, I would have loved to have that as child care option at my office. I had to take that risk of leaving my son somewhere not knowing what he was going to be. He always survived somehow when I got back, but I know the fear of families. They want to stick together, especially these days. But I know, Mr. Walt, you mentioned something on this same as the child care, but would an increase in a little bit more of a benefit for child care deductibility and also maybe dependent care deductibility for people like me and others who have a dependent child or family member, maybe a parent that they have to take care of, is that something that if we increase that benefit, would that be beneficial to your employees?
Thank you for the question, and certainly it most likely would benefit our associates. Benefits that support working families are very important to us. I mentioned, the 400,000 associates we have. Most of those are frontline in our stores, in our distribution centers. So certainly policies that support working families would benefit our associate population.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. It's really incredible that you're all talking. These are really important issues. And I just want to say one shout out to one of the counties. I just went to the Wyoming County Fair in upstate New York. The county legislature, or the county supervisors, do a wonderful thing. They actually hold a meeting, their August meeting at their county fair, and it's filled with all kinds of people out there to see their government in action. So shout out to Becky Ryan, the supervisor, and thank you, Chairman Smith, for doing this out in Iowa. We appreciate it. Thanks. Yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Malley-Talk, the other lady from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've traveled many parts of the country hearing from people like you, and whether you're in Iowa or whether you're in my home state of New York, the reality is that the high inflation, the high interest rates, the anti-energy policies of the Biden-Harris administration are crushing American families and American businesses. 66% of Americans say they're living paycheck to paycheck, and if they think it's hard now, that is nothing compared to what it will be like if Democrats have their way and allow the provisions that we're discussing today from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act enacted by President Trump, if they allow that to expire in 2025. Under TCJA, on average, Americans with less than 100K in income got an average of 16% in a tax cut. We saw the creation of millions of jobs, record low employment for African Americans, for Hispanics, for women, for veterans. We saw the middle class wages across this country lifted. And we saw the doubling of the standard deduction, which was a major credit for working families, and also the doubling of the child tax credit for working families, lifting 6 million Americans out of poverty. And important to New Yorkers, it got rid of the alternative minimum tax for millions of middle-class families. Last June, I introduced legislation to increase the standard deduction by an additional 2,000 for single filers and 4,000 for married couples. If it were law today, families would benefit with a $33,200 tax deduction in 2024. And while I want to increase it, sadly, Kamala Harris, the Democrats, they've said that they want to get rid of, they actually want to cut our deduction in half. They want to go back to what it was before we had this critical tax relief. So I'll start with Sarah. As a family, what would the standard deduction being increased even further mean for a family like yours?
Well, I think first and foremost, thank you for the question. Reducing the standard deduction would negatively impact my family because it would raise my taxable income, both at the federal and the state level. We experienced benefits from tax simplicity. I didn't have to have receipts, all over the floor trying to itemize all this stuff, trying to save a buck. We were able to take the standard. But again, Iowa and many states use the federal taxable income as the starting point for state taxes owed. And so with the reduction in the federal standard deduction, my state taxes will also go up. So I'm not going to be hit once with this tax increase. I'm going to get hit multiple times over.
That's right, and that's exactly why I wanted to see the standard deduction not only kept but enhanced to protect more middle-class families, because that's who really benefits from it. And with that said, the alternative minimum tax, do you have an opinion if that were to be added back?
Again, I think any tax that's brought back that is hurting American families and taking more of our earned money away from us so that we can't spend it on our families and invest in our homes and our children is a bad thing.
Well, that's exactly what, sadly, Kamala Harris and the Democrats have said they intend to do. $7 trillion is what my colleague said in tax increases is what they're proposing. But I also, I don't have a farm in my district, but my constituents do eat, and they use energy. And so the Biden-Harris tax and energy policies have been crushing domestic energy production. It's driving up the cost of everything, I believe, right? So can you talk as farmers about how energy drives up the cost of food for the people I represent in New York, and also maybe you want to touch on some of the renewable energy sources that we can derive from both corn, and I did visit a facility where there was renewable natural gas from food waste, from cow manure, and I thought that was really interesting. It's cleaner, it's more efficient, it's more affordable, and it's than these EVs that they're trying to push us on through all these incentives that go to communist China. Would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. So just to let's talk about EVs for a moment. I know they're trying to do that to tractors, and let me tell you, that is definitely not going to work. It's going to increase the weight of that tractor by 3 to 4 times. It's going to increase the price of that tractor by that exact same amount. And then, oh, by the way, in the wintertime, 60 below, they don't start. So, and getting back to your being able to use other besides the biofuels to use the methane, and just so you know, there's more landfill methane given off than any other source in the United States, so there's a place to tap. But when it comes to using the other fuels, first of all, right now the ethanol is available, and we can put it right into the gas tank. We are pushing for the next gen Fuels Act to be passed to increase those amounts of ethanol to be put in fuel tanks. So, and for every percent of, this is from the American Lung Association, so for every percent of ethanol that we are able to put into that fuel tank, we are also reducing our healthcare costs because we're taking particulates out of the air. So especially if and I've been to New York, and it's amazing, but it's not Iowa. But anyway, just the total amount of particulates in the air just due to the pollution. So.
Okay. And Mr. Suckup, I don't know if you wanted to add to that, but I did have one small question after this, if you will, Mr. Chairman.
No, the biofuels are critical for the supplying us across the U.S. Energy efficiency and self-sustainable here in the U.S. And that's what we have to increase. That lowers prices throughout. Going back the 4 years, we were $1 lower on gasoline, and yet ethanol was practical and making money.
Now, I'm a New Yorker, first time in Iowa, first time at the State Fair, so a last question very important question, in my opinion, to wrap up the hearing here. What is the food that I should try today? I'll go down the line. Name one food, please.
Pork chop on a stick.
Well, I'm smelling bacon right now, so whatever that smell is, try that. That smells great.
All right, Ms. Curry.
The deep fried pickle with the ranch dressing.
All right.
Sorry, pork chop or a steak.
Okay, you're the second person to tell me that.
Corn dog.
The deep fat fried lobster on a stick.
All right, thank you.
I want to thank the Iowa delegation for having us. I want to thank you, Congressman Feenstra, for being a stellar member of the Ways and Means Committee and for bringing us up here. I want to thank the Iowa State Fairgrounds, and I want to thank each and every one of you all for your great ideas and the policy solutions that hopefully we can move towards. I think that every member of this committee will be leaving the Iowa State Fair with additional great ideas from on the tax code, but also probably higher cholesterol. With that, please be advised that members have 2 weeks to submit written questions to be answered later in writing. Those questions and your answers will be made part of the formal hearing record. And with that, the committee stands adjourned.